Hey, this is Em Hollis, and welcome to the messy truth of transformation, where it's okay to be magical and messy. This isn't your typical personal growth podcast. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, the raw, the honest, the shadow work, the spirals, the breakthroughs, and the beautiful chaos of becoming who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt alone on your healing and growth journey, or you wondered why it feels hard even when you're doing the work, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Let's dive into the messy truth of what it actually takes to transform your life. Well, hello, and we are here. It's official. This is podcast episode of the messy truth of transformation, episode number 1. And of course, it has to start out messy. You can probably hear my dog barking in the background, because we have the cutest little 40-pound golden doodle that likes to be near me at all times. He does not like to be alone. So he's here in the podcast studio with me, and any little sound he hears, he likes to bark at. I'm looking at him right now. So of course, we have to start the first episode with Murphy being heard and known. And since this podcast is called The Messy Truth of Transformation, and is all about authenticity and realness, I have to be totally transparent and authentic and sharing that I am actually really nervous. I am actually really, really nervous. I've had different YouTube channels. I have done interviews, done led hundreds of breathwork sessions online. I have led retreats. I have done all sorts of things in front of people. And yet, for some reason, as soon as the camera goes on, I freeze sometimes. And that's why I get so nervous. I've had so many people tell me, like, well, you're a great speaker, you're a great communicator. And I'm like, yeah, but on the inside, I feel like a little girl that's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. For some reason, when the cameras come on, that's what happens to me. So in full transparency, I'm a little nervous, and I am assuming that in the world of podcasting, the first episode is probably the hardest to do, because it's the unknown. It's like doing anything new for the first time. And even though I've done lots of YouTube videos and things like that, I've never actually done a podcast. So welcome to my world. Welcome to the messy truth of transformation. I think the other reason that I'm nervous or scared is because I have realized over the last couple of years that my human self can be somewhat of a perfectionist. And I didn't really know that before. And here's the tricky part about being a perfectionist. And hopefully you all can relate to this, at least those of you that have a perfection streak on the human aspect of you. My grandpa had this kind of saying, or just philosophy about life, that if you're going to do something, do it well. Like, do it all the way and do it well. And I value that. Like, I like that I am that way with things. It means I want to give it 100% of me. It means I don't want to just half-ass something, which makes the things that I do a little bit more valuable, hopefully, in the world. However, when that goes into the shadow, into the extreme, it can stop me from doing a lot of things, because of course, everything can't be perfect. But in my mind, I'm trying to control everything, right? That's what perfectionism ultimately is all about, is control. And I'm trying to make everything perfect. And I'll tell you what, if this is not a manifestation of how this works, I'm getting everything set up to just sit my ass down and record this first episode. And I got this really cool, cute pink boom to put my microphone on. And the desk I have is like way too thick for it to hold onto the desk. So I'm like, that's not going to work. Like, I can't plug in my phone. Like, all these things, of course, are just kind of going chaotic. Murphy's barking. And it's all wanting to stop me from recording this first episode. And I'm like, nope, you are just going to sit down and you're going to do it and you're going to get it out, and it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. Like, the thing that I do as a perfectionist is I will compare my first episode of this podcast, which, in some ways it always sucks, the first one, because you're like, I have a lot to learn, right? Which is exciting too. But I'll compare my first episode with somebody else's like 350th episode. Like they've had all this time to learn the skill and learn how to get better. And yet I will still compare myself to them. And so that is the really icky shadow of perfectionism. And what I also am, the complete other paradox of that, actually. And this goes into what this episode is about, which is why did I start this podcast in the first place? There's this other side of me that's actually like really authentic and really real. And I don't like conversations that don't go deep. I don't like surrounding myself with people who can't like have honest, real, deep communications with each other. Like I will fart in front of people like that. Because we all fart, right? We all fart. It's not something that we should be ashamed of. So there is this side of me that's like, I did a Facebook video yesterday, a quick one. I was just sharing a tip and I had my towel on because I just got out of the shower. I had my towel on my head. I had no makeup on. I'd done nothing. And I was like, I have to share this right now because I can feel it in my bones. And so there is also this other paradoxical side of my human self. It's like, just show up and share. And so ultimately, that's why I'm here. And that's why I named this podcast The Messy Truth of Transformation. Because ultimately, if we're perfectionists and trying to control everything in our lives, then it stops us from sharing what's on our heart. And I know at least it does for me. It will stop me from sharing what's on my heart. And here's the thing with our hearts. That's where emotion lives. Our hearts are our ability to feel emotion. And one of my soul's lesson in this incarnation is to be okay with emotions. You'll probably hear me say this a million times on this podcast if we continue to grow together, that my daughter has been my biggest teacher for this. You'll hear me talk a lot about the quadrant theory, I'm sure too. She's a natural born quadrant too. And so she lives in the world of emotions. And what actually, I thought that I was going to teach her all these like self-help and personal development concepts, and I was going to save her, and really in the process, I learned that she's actually my savior. She's actually the one teaching me the lessons. And what she has taught me is that emotions, yes, they are messy. But isn't that the beauty? Like, isn't that the beauty of being human and connection is the messiness of it all? And the heart is messy and human emotions are for sure messy. Human connections, humans are messy. And actually that's what makes life so rich is what I found. And so if we can just be honest about all of that, then maybe we can all connect at a much deeper level and we can take off the weight of all the masks of perfectionism or whatever else your thing is, and just like actually connect like soul to soul, which is, pretty amazing to be a part of. So now that you have that little intro, I do sort of, I'm not making everything perfect, but I do have my notes here because I do want to be sure I can go off on tangents for sure. And so I do want to be sure to cover a couple things. And the first thing that I want to cover is why I started this podcast in the first place. That's the episode title. Why the hell did I start this podcast? I have to say that in all honesty, once again, and in being really authentic, I was never going to start a podcast because I was like, everybody and their dog has a podcast. That sea is so full that why would I ever want to compete in that world? There are just too many and there's so much information out there already. It's like that's part of the problem. And what I realized was a couple things. Number one, competition should only ever be to make ourselves better. Like we're competing against ourselves and nobody else can be me. Like literally nobody else can be M. Hollis. And so, of course, I'm bringing something different, even though there may be literally a million podcasts that talk about the same content I'm talking about. They're not going to talk about it in the way I'm going to talk about it because they don't have my experiences. And so I really believe that we live in an and universe and not an or universe. And what I mean by that is I think we all have a piece to this massive puzzle of whatever this human experience is. I literally think we all bring a piece to the puzzle. Like we all have some sort of an answer to how this all works. within us, like our own unique answer, our own unique puzzle piece. And so again, even though two people may be saying the same things, they're not going to say it in the same way. And someone else is going to resonate differently because I have a different energy about me that's not the same about anyone else. And some of you may totally resonate with that energy and some of you may not, which is another reason why it's scary to start something new, because you put yourself out there, especially if you have a podcast about authenticity, because I'm going to share a lot of myself in this. I'm going to share a lot of the messy parts of myself, which means I totally open myself up to scrutiny, to being wrong, to people not liking me, all of those things. And that's the messy part of it. Some of you may resonate, some of you may not. And that's okay, because the ones that do will hopefully gain a lot of value from this. Being here and doing this, I'm saying I'm me, and nobody else out there has a podcast that is M. Hollis. And so that's really what I decided was like, I have wisdom to share because I've been through a lot of things in my life. And I believe that I can add some value. And since nobody else has had my experiences, nobody else can share sort of the perspectives and the value and the wisdom that I have to share. So I think that's pretty cool, right? That everybody has something to add. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle. So like everybody should start a podcast. So that was like one of the things that helped me go, you know what? I love learning about new people. For one, I love listening to people's stories, and I love sharing tools that may help people on the journey that I have been on. I love doing that. And I've had a lot of people tell me that for some reason they really like my voice. As you'll see, I create my own meditations and breath work, and probably like the number one thing I hear from the people that do them is they just love the sound of my voice. Like for some reason my voice is soothing to them. And I honestly remember one of the first things that Scott, my husband, said about me when we first got together was he loved my voice. So I thought, well, maybe that's part of the magic that I have to add to the world, and what better way for people to hear that than a podcast. So here I am sharing the messy truth. I have always, like I said, my whole life really been about being authentic and real. And I think that's something that people feel from me, that they always have, and something that people can relate to. Like, yeah, that's what I want. Some people won't at all, but other people be like, yes, especially in a world of AI and never really knowing what the truth is. I think that you feel the truth in your body. Like when you feel something that resonates, at least for me, I feel it somatically in my body. And that's when we resonate. And so going through the last 10 years of personal growth and spiritual growth and inner healing, being on this journey for the last 10 years, what I have come to realize is that it is effing messy. It is not linear by any means. It is not perfect by any means. Some days you're taking 5 steps forwards. Other days it feels like you're taking 10 steps back. And that is the messy truth that nobody wants to talk about. And I think that for me, when I listen to podcasts or YouTube channels, and I listen to people that I want to learn from, that have done things in the world that I want to do, when I can tune into them the most is when they share something personal about themselves that they have gone through. And that is what I want to do on this podcast. Like, there are a million podcasts out there that will interview the same kind of people in this space. And those people will share their knowledge and their tools and their work and their wisdom, which is amazing, right? We want to learn. That's how I learn. But what I want to do on this podcast is not necessarily share their tools. I want to share them. I want them to share the really messy moments that nobody talks about. It's like this, everybody says like, oh, you see the end result, but you didn't see all the really hard stuff in the middle. Well, let's start showing the hard stuff in the middle. Let's stop like just showing the end result, because when we do that, what the hell do we all do? We compare, right? I compare my first one to someone else's 350th episode. And what I want to do in this podcast is show the messy middle. Like, I want people to share those really challenging moments that they got through. So then everybody listening to it that's on this path of personal growth and spiritual growth and inner healing can go, oh, that's where I'm at right now. So that means I'm doing it right. I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm actually doing it right because
I'm experiencing these messy moments too. And then maybe I and my guests can offer some tools to help with that messy middle so that people don't give up. And that's really what I'm passionate about. And so when I thought of that, because there's been many times in my life where I was about to do something hard or scary, or I was going through something, and I heard a story of like a famous person. I heard a personal story of a challenge that they went through on the journey. And it was like relief. Like I could breathe. And from that breath, I could still move forward instead of stopping. So in saying all that, I really had 4 intentions in starting this podcast and why I feel like it can add some value, hopefully, to anyone that listens to it. Number 1 is to really normalize the good, the bad, and the messy of personal growth, of spiritual development, and of inner healing, like to normalize that. So that doesn't become something we all just skip over when we talk about personal growth, self-help, spiritual development, inner healing, to really normalize the messy, right? That it's okay. It's okay to be in the messy. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And then number 2, in sort of the same note as that, if we're normalizing that, the second intention is to help listeners not feel so alone or that they're doing something wrong. Because if they feel like they're doing something wrong, they may stop themselves from really living out their full potential. And so if you don't feel so alone and you're like, I'm going through this thing right now, like maybe I'm in a new relationship and the relationship feels like healthy, but it's kind of scary because it feels so healthy and I don't know what to do. And if like we normalize that I don't know what to do, and we normalize those feelings of fear when something really great is happening and other people are sharing their stories around that, you're not going to feel so alone from that. And then you're going to go, oh, okay, this is actually normal. So here's some tools to get through that. So then I can continue down the path and continue down the journey and not give up on that because I think I'm doing it all alone, or I think something's wrong with me, right? And so number 2 is really about helping you to not feel so alone. And I'll say that in turn helps me not feel so alone because I'm on this path. I'm on this journey. I've been doing it for really my whole life in ways that I didn't know I was doing it, which I'll share, but really the last 10 years has been like I'm on the path, I'm on the journey. And it can feel very, very, very lonely. And I don't care what it is you're doing in your life. If you're growing in some way, if you're changing and transforming in some way, whether you're coming off of an addiction or you're losing weight or you're growing spiritually or you're starting a new business or you're doing a lot of inner work and a lot of inner healing, I don't care what it is. If you're on the journey of transformation, there are going to be challenging, freaking moments. There just are. And those moments can feel very lonely. And so if I can contribute in some way for you to not feel so lonely, and then in turn, I don't feel so lonely because I now have a community, then it's a lot easier to get through those challenging moments. You can get through them with a lot more grace and ease. So that's number 2. Number 3, offer community to individuals who desire more authentic and deeper connections. I hope to promote that. That's been me from the first memories that I have as a child. In fact, I always joke, like, and even in high school, people would come to me with like drama or rumors or gossip. And I'm like, nope, not interested. Like, don't want to hear any of that. I don't believe anything gossip that I hear. That's just not like I'm any better than anybody else. It's just something that's never interested me. Like, I would rather sit and talk about the nature of the universe for the next 5 hours than what's happening on, some trend on social media or what's happening in the news. That's just me. I just desire those more like real authentic connections. And that's what I have in my life now. Like the people who I'm surrounded with, they're very deep and very rich connections. And so I would love to create a community around that concept. And then number 4, most importantly, really for me, is to be able to offer you tools, guidance, and resources to help you navigate those really messy moments. And so that you can get through them with more grace and more ease, and probably most importantly, self-acceptance. Because I heard this the other day from somebody, and it's so true. It's almost like as soon as you get on the self-help path of like personal growth and spiritual growth, it's almost like you give yourself another voice of condemnation. Like all of a sudden there's this other voice of like, you're not doing good enough, or you need to push harder. It's like you all of a sudden develop this other voice of like yelling at yourself because you're not doing good enough. And I found that in this space. And what I have found to be the number one tool out of so many tools that I've personally tried in the last 10 years is literally loving myself. Like that's it. Loving the little girl in me that's always just wanting love and acceptance, and always just wanting to feel like she's a good person, and always just wanting to feel like she's okay, and that she's, she matters, and that she's valuable, and that she's worthy to receive. And really it's just like loving her all the time. And so I think that when we can allow ourselves more self-acceptance while being on the personal growth and spiritual awakening journey, it's going to change the entire journey for us. And it helps those really challenging moments. So those are really my 4 intentions for the listeners and for this creation of mine in the messy truth of transformation. And so I'll give you a brief background of my own personal story, just so anyone that stumbles upon this first episode and joins me in this journey that's sure to be messy and crazy. If you're stumbling upon this and you have no idea who I am, I just want to give you a brief context as to how I got here in this very hot moment, recording this first episode with you. And then, hopefully, like I said, what you can gain from being on this journey with me, because it will be a journey, and for sure will be a messy, authentic journey, but that's been my life, so if you want to join the show, then buckle up, because it for certain will be a wild ride. Just quickly, I am 41 years old, and really I'm 41. So the first 31 years of my life, I spent them feeling like on the outside of humanity is the best way to explain it. Like I felt like an alien. Like, what is wrong with me that I just cannot be like a normal human? And these thoughts manifested at a very young age. One of my core boardroom members, my core beliefs is that something's wrong with me. And so that played out my entire childhood in different ways. And I always just felt like, God, why can't I just be like normal humans? And so I got really good at trying to blend myself, trying to become a chameleon to people. And because I lived with a dad who had a pretty big temper at any moment, I sort of walked on eggshells, and I became the person that could tune into people's emotional states and energy very quickly. Like I had to learn that as sort of a coping mechanism of like, okay, what mood's he in? What mood she in? Like just always kind of tuning into that so that I could feel safe. And so I became the person that was like way overly sensitive. My nervous system is super sensitive. And so I'm feeling different things all the time, and I don't know why or how to deal with them. And on top of that, I'm feeling like I'm totally weird and different. And so what happened was the first time I think I drank alcohol, I was 12 years old. The first time I thought about suicide, actually, I was 12 years old. I lived with my dad the first 10 years of my life. My parents divorced when I was 2. And at 12, I lived with my dad and across the state in Washington. I grew up just north of Seattle in Marysville. I was born in Spokane. And so when my parents divorced at 2, my dad moved me across the state to Marysville, Washington. And so my mom and my siblings and my family all lived in Spokane. And so, that was rough, just living away from them. And so what happened was when I moved with my mom when I was 12, at that age, we start going, our brainwaves start to change, and we start going into more of an alpha and a beta brainwave state, and we start becoming like the personality and the ego that we're going to be around that age. And so as I moved and had this big change and started like figuring out who I was supposed to be, I actually started just getting more and more depressed, because I was like, I don't know who the F I am. I don't know why I can't fit in, but I feel all these emotions and I don't know how to deal with them. And I feel very alone. And this is really when you could say depression really started to kick in. And so for the first couple of years at my mom's, it was okay. And then around like 14 was really when I started drinking more heavily. And at 15, actually like 14 and a half, in all full transparency, I lost my virginity. And then I realized, oh, I can get attention if I sleep with guys. And so at 15, started kind of sleeping around, drinking a lot, doing a lot of drugs. Had my first suicide attempt at age 15, swallowed down 90 aspirin because I couldn't deal with this constant sense of like, what is wrong with me? And I don't fit here on earth. And ultimately, like, people would be better off if I wasn't here. I mean, that's what you think when you're about to try to commit suicide. And of course, like back then, they didn't have like mental health. Like that was not talked about. In fact, going to therapy was like weird. And my mom put me in therapy. So I started therapy at age 14 years old, but it was like another even more confirmation that something's wrong with me, like why I'm not like everybody else. And so that just kind of continued until I was 16. And then another suicide attempt, number 2 at 16. And eventually my mom sent me to a girls' home basically down in Ensenada, Mexico. They actually did a documentary on the company that the documentary on Netflix was about one of the sister programs in the States. I was actually down in Ensenada, Mexico. But for me, I didn't have, it was really, of course, scary. I was there for 10 months, but it actually changed everything for me. So I had a really good therapist that was there, and she taught me a lot about depression and things like that. And even at that age, I remember, like being a natural born leader. It was this program that you had to go through, and you had to graduate, and you had to go through all these steps and blah, 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 blah. And usually took people about a year. And, after some time, I'm like, well, you don't have to graduate the program to be successful when you get home. Like, you just have to make a choice that you want to do that. And the girls there were like, whoa, that's like a concept nobody talks about. But I just did because it just seemed like common sense to me. And so that was like the first inkling of like, yeah, maybe I have something different to say. Maybe I am different. And maybe I do have something different to say. And maybe other people will resonate with that because other people don't feel like they fit in either. They feel like an alien on this planet. And so when I got home at age 17, I ended up meeting my first husband. 18, we got married, pregnant. I had my son at 19. We were kids, so we ended up getting a divorce when I was like 22. And then I met my most recent ex-husband around 22, 23. And so that began a marriage of 10 years. I ended up having my daughter. And what also started at the beginning of that 10-year relationship was an addiction to opiates, to hydrocodone, to pain pills. And at the time, the reason why it started was because I was going to college full time and had my son, of course, and was working. And I noticed that when I took this pain pill, it actually gave me energy and it allowed me to like study and go to work. It was almost like an upper for me and to deal with the stress of all of that. And it worked really well. And so that became a closet addiction for 10 years. The only time I stopped in that 10 years was when I was pregnant with my daughter. And then I was breastfeeding. I breastfed her for like 3 months. And then I started right back up again because, I didn't quit because I wanted to quit. I quit because I had to. And so that, in that 10 years began almost like a container of all the darkest parts of myself and the most traumatic parts of my childhood, like all manifesting in my reality. And so I lived in a very dysfunctional marriage. There was not a lot of like deep love or respect for each other. It was, I walked on eggshells. I was scared all the time. But mostly I just didn't feel like I could be me, right? It was like that complete manifestation of you're not safe to be who you really are. And so I kept myself busy all the time. Like I was working full time. I had a Airbnb business on the side. We had acreage, we just had lots of things going on. And so I did not stop from the moment I got up to the moment I went to bed. And I didn't realize it. Of course I didn't know at the time, but it was a coping mechanism. It was like, okay, I don't have to deal with the fact that I am living a complete and utter lie. I don't have to deal with the fact that this is a very toxic and dysfunctional marriage. I don't have to deal with the fact that I am like so unhappy and depressed, but I'm just pretending to the outside world that everything is okay and I'm going to be fine. And I did that. I kept doing that because I thought this is what you were supposed to do in life. Like everyone says like, get married and then get a good job. I was working for the state of Idaho. So check mark that. We had bought a home, check mark that. We had kids, check mark that. We had some toys, check mark that. We went on vacation once a year, check mark that. Like insurance and retirement and like, okay, check mark all the boxes. And yet I am absolutely miserable inside. And it wasn't because I was like, well, this isn't good enough. It was just like something is missing. Like I did all this and yet something so deep is missing from my life. And there was this thing of like, well, maybe, I'll do all the things so I won't be different and I won't be weird. And this will solve that problem. Only it didn't. I was like, okay, I still feel this like really deep sadness inside of me and just deep unfulfillment and meaningless. Like, okay, I'm doing this, but life feels meaningless. And ultimately, that's what prompted my own, as you could call it, awakening. And about 10 years into that, I remember my mom, she moved I was living in Kellogg, Idaho at the time, and she had been living in Hawaii for a couple of years. And she came to live in Kellogg and she stayed with us for a little bit. And then she got a house. And it was just like having that sort of sense of support system there that sort of like, it was like a snap went off in my brain. And it sort of like helped remind me of an essence that I always had, an essence of me that had been missing for so long. She helped sort of ignite that. And I remember clearly it was like a moment of change for me when she was like, she saw my life and she was like, you realize you can't keep this up, right? Like you realize this isn't a sustainable life. And at the time I'm like, whatever, and so she slowly kept sending me things about like Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra. My mom had never been, neither of my parents had ever been religious. I wasn't raised in religion at all, but she had always kind of talked about like the universe and spirits and ghosts and psychics and things like that, which I always like dug and believed in, but there wasn't like, I always believed in God. I believed in God my whole life. I hated churches. Did not resonate with churches. I would walk in and they felt so cold and icky. And I was like, this does not feel like God to me. And so God to me was just a very personal relationship. I had a very intimate personal relationship with God that I didn't share with anybody else. So I knew I believed in God. I knew I believed in like near-death experiences and angels and ghosts and things like that, but I'd never had a framework to put it all together. And so when she started sending me this stuff, I had no frame of reference for personal growth or spirituality. I didn't know what that was. I just had pieces of the puzzle. And she was sending me that stuff. I was ignoring it, of course, because it was coming from my mom. So I didn't want to hear it. I have to do things on my own. I don't like to be pushed. And so one day I walked into her room and on her nightstand was a book. And the only reason I picked it up because the cover looked really cool. And I always loved to read. I'd always been a reader. And so the cover looked really cool. So I picked it up and it was called You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I read like the back or whatever what it's about. And I was like, wow, this sounds interesting. She's like, take it home and go read it. And I start reading it and just dive headfirst into this book. And she ended up getting Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza's first book. And we had like a little study group going. Like we would read a little bit, then I would come to her house and we would discuss the concepts. And we didn't really know this is what we were doing. It's just we were enjoying the process of learning this. And so really it was my mom that prompted my awakening for me. If it weren't for her getting that book, I don't know where I'd be. And so I dove headfirst. And then I started actually reading all the other emails she was sending. And I started listening to Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle and Oprah's Super Soul series and Tony Robbins. And it just like opened my mind and consciousness to this entire world of personal growth and spiritual development and inner healing. I'd gone to therapy at that point for years and years and years and years. Therapy was nothing new to me, but therapy didn't like go into like the spiritual aspect. And it also didn't go into like, how do I want to transform and change to become a different person? Not just like talking about all the things that happened in the past, but like, who do I want to be, and that I can be that. I didn't think I was capable of that. At that point in my life, I'd been a closet addict for 10 years. Like I didn't look at myself in a very high lens, clearly. Like my behaviors could tell you that. The relationship I was in could clearly tell you I didn't value or believe in myself. And so I entered into that world. And that was, like I said, about 10 years ago, and everything changed in my life over those 10 years. A year later ended up going to a couple Dr. Joe retreats, ended up meeting the love of my life that we're together now to this day, ended up starting a business in coaching and guiding and helping people through this journey. I quit pain pills cold turkey. I have, deepened my relationship with my kids, and I just have such amazing and deep relationships now. And I think more than anything, I choose what I do in my life now. Like I don't really do anything because I have to or out of obligation. I do things because I choose, because they resonate and they feel good. And I think ultimately when we talk about freedom, like why are we doing all of this personal growth in the first place, and change and transformation? Why are we doing that? Because ultimately we all want to wake up and choose our lives. Like we don't want to wake up and live in Groundhog Day every day and like, oh, this is it. We want to experience excitement. We want to experience passion. We want to experience close and deep relationships. We want to experience wealth and traveling and all of those things that wealth can bring. Like we want to be able to choose that. We don't want to have to wake up every day and feel like we have no power in our lives to choose what we want to do. And I think, that is a big reason why we're all here. We don't want to live in those states of like feeling powerless and feeling like this is just as good as life gets, because that sucks. Like I think there's an endless amount of growth that can happen and an endless amount of experiences. In fact, an infinite amount. And so to say like this is as good as it gets is just crazy. And so 10 years later, my life is completely different. In 2018 is when I initially opened our first business, which was called Insight Unlimited. And Scott and I were like, we're just going to start coaching people because we've totally transformed our lives and we want to teach people how to do that. And that has changed and evolved and transformed over the last 6 years. And we've done some different branding and different courses. I've led tons and tons and tons of courses. The sort of core thing that has been there for me from the beginning is creating breathwork and meditation for people. And so ultimately this podcast is sort of like going back to the original M. Hollis brand, which I had years ago. And really that is just this podcast and meditations that you can buy that will help you through the messy parts, meditations that will help you get to those places that you desire to go to, and help you be in places where you don't need to desire to go anywhere. It's just being right here. And so those breathwork and the breathwork tracks and the meditation tracks are all just tools to help you in those moments. And so that's really what this brand, M. Hollis, and this podcast, The Messy Truth of Transformation, is all about, because there has been so many messy moments in those 10 years, like so many effing messy moments. And so many times I felt alone in that. And I want to provide something for you that's real and authentic and helps you to understand that you're not alone in this journey. We are, even though when we feel the most alone, we aren't. We are not ever alone. And when I had my first big experience with energy, I'll share at some point on this podcast, but I had, my body's kind of getting thrown around by energy. And I heard this voice, like somebody was literally speaking in my ear. I heard this voice say that you're never alone. I'm always in your heart all of the time. And I hold on to that. And I think that means obviously spiritually and energetically, we're never alone, but we're also never alone like in our human side. We aren't. There's a billion people out there, and there's at least one that will resonate with you. And maybe it's me and maybe it's somebody else, but there is for sure at least one in the billions of people that are on this planet. And so you aren't alone, and you can get through this, the rough times and the really great times, right? Because something I've come to learn is like, it's not always going to be really great times, and it's not always going to be really sucky bad times either. Like neither one of those lasts forever. I just believe the more that we have community in this process, and the more that we have tangible, practical tools, because the woo-woo can get very woo-woo and very abstract and very philosophical. with sometimes little tangible, practical action steps to take. And the practical personal development can get a little too rigid and practical and needs a little bit of the abstract and the hairy-fairy and the philosophy. Where those two meet in the middle, that's my jam. That is where I just flourish in, is right where those two things meet in the middle. Hopefully, with this podcast, I am able to accomplish those four intentions and provide some value to you in your life so that you're not feeling so alone, that you continue down this journey. And ultimately, you hear stories of people that, guess what? They did get through those moments of messiness. They got through them and they created something that they could never have even remotely imagined before because they got through those messy moments. And ultimately, I'm here to help them share those messy moments so that you can get through them too. So there you go. Episode number 1, The Messy Truth of Transformation, in the books. It wasn't as scary as I guess I thought it was going to be. We'll see on the other side. I'm excited for episode 2. The sort of format I hope to stick with is 2 solo episodes followed by a guest episode for now anyways. I'm sure it'll change and transform. The other thing I hope to stick to is that I do 3 episodes a month, leaving 1 week with no episodes. And that's just because that's how I want to choose more consciously how to navigate my professional life, my business life, is that it's not always push, that there's time for rest. And so I think a healthy balance for me anyway is 3 episodes a month and then 1 week of rest. So with that all being said, welcome to the Messy Truth of Transformation. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. If this episode resonated in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who's in the thick of it too. If you want more behind the scenes, or you want tools to support you along your journey of messiness, come hang out with me over on Instagram at mhollis_thesage. But most importantly, just remember, the mess is part of the magic.